the 6th September 2023 Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Holt, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rogers.
Present.
Mr. Rogers represents the Berkeley District. Ms. Knoll.
Present.
Ms. Knoll represents the Stonehouse District. Mr. Rose.
Here.
Mr. Rose represents the Roberts District and is Vice Chair to the Commission. Mr. Haldeman.
Here.
Mr. Haldeman is an at-large member. Mr. O'Connor.
Here.
Mr. O'Connor is an at-large member. Mr. Kropp. Here. Mr. Kropp represents the Powhatan District. Mr. Polster.
Here.
Mr. Polster represents the Jamestown District and is Chair of the Commission. I'm Paul Holt, Director of Community Development. It's my pleasure to serve as Secretary to the Commission. Sitting to my left this evening is Ms. Liz Parman, our Deputy County Attorney. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. For those citizens that are here tonight for the Hankins-Dunn rezoning and residential cluster development item on the night's agenda, the applicant has requested a deferral to our 1 November meeting. We will open the public hearing and keep it open until the November meeting. However, if you speak tonight, you will not be able to speak again. Having said that, we'll go to the first item, which is public comment. And these are topics that are not subject to a public hearing. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. And do we have any speaker cards, Mr. Holt? Okay, I will open and close the public comment. And the next item is report from commissioners. Mr. Haldeman from the policy.
Sure. The Policy Committee last met on August 10th with a quorum present. Ms. Costello introduced a discussion on the process for reviewing the capital improvements program for fiscal years 2025 through 29, specifically proposing a written question and answer format and a change to the customary schedule. After the discussion, the committee unanimously recommended that committee members submit questions in writing directly to one staff leader, who will then distribute them to the relevant departments and to other committee members. Subsequent exchanges with department representatives will be copied to all involved parties. The committee further recommends that it retain the option to question department representatives in person as the need arises. In response to an initiating resolution from the Board of Supervisors, Ms. Costello opened a discussion to consider possible amendments regarding the use list of the General Business District B1. Committee members expressed uncertainty about the purpose, scope, and intent of the resolution and whether it would include definitions pertaining to the list. 4 items from the list were discussed. Staff will ask the board for further clarification of the resolution as a framework for discussion at the next meeting. There was a brief discussion about the amount of additional work needed to meet the goals of the 2045 Comprehensive Plan in light of the pending budget, CIP, and other demands on staff time. The Planning Commission discussion section of the next Planning Commission agenda might be a good time to flesh this out. The meeting was adjourned at 3:42 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Haldeman. Any questions for Mr. Haldeman? Okay, we'll go to our next item, which is the consent agenda. And the consent agenda items are deemed to be non-controversial. Does anybody wish to pull an agenda item? We have the minutes. Hearing none, a roll call vote?
Just a voice vote on the minutes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the motion carries. So, our first public hearing is SUP 23-0012, 8659 Richmond Road Solar Project. Ms. Yates, oh, you're here. Sorry.
Okay.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. Mr. John Townsend has applied on behalf of Sun Tribe Development for a special use permit to develop and construct a 5-megawatt solar panel facility for electrical power generation, storage, and transmission on an approximately 67.8-acre portion of parcels located at 8659 Richmond Road and 8659A Richmond Road. Furthermore, these parcels are currently zoned A1 General Agriculture and designated rural lands on the 2045 Comprehensive Plan Land Use Map and are located outside the primary service area. This SUP application was submitted to the Planning Division prior to the Board of Supervisors initiating resolution on large-scale solar farm applications. Consequently, this case is being presented to you prior to the adoption of any James City County policy on large-scale solar farms. The parcel is split by Richmond Road right-of-way, and the entirety of the project will lie south of Richmond Road. The design of the project depicts solar panels on a single-axis tracking system that will rotate throughout the day to track the sun. The electricity produced by the panels is collected and connected to the existing electrical grid. According to the applicant, this project is intended to operate for a term of 30 years with the potential for 2 additional 5-year periods up to a total of 40 years. At the end of the sublease term, the owner will cease operation of the project and execute a final decommissioning plan agreed to by the landlord and project owner. The 2045 Comprehensive Plan Land Use Map designates the property as rural lands. While not a typical primary use, staff finds this use could be appropriate in rural lands, as solar farms in general are low-intensity uses after the initial construction phase. This use is designed to be temporary in nature and intended to return to agricultural or forestal use at the conclusion of the lease term and decommissioning measures. For this particular proposal, staff finds the use generally compatible with the character of the area and generally in accordance with the rural lands development standards. Also, the majority of the land has been cleared for farming and is surrounded by natural wooded growth. The development plan shows a 50-foot wide vegetated buffer along Richmond Road and a 35-foot wide vegetated buffer along the perimeter of the facility site. Lastly, this is a low use with respect to traffic and noise. Staff has proposed conditions to mitigate impacts from this proposal. Those conditions are listed in attachment number 1 and address public safety, stormwater and resource protection measures to mitigate potential pollutants and flooding, preservation of nearby and surrounding properties, placing utilities underground, buffering to mitigate visual impacts to the community character corridor, native pollinators, and public improvements addressing public need and benefit. To that end, following the publication of the packet materials for this case, staff has reviewed condition number 2 and recommends a revision of this condition to include language so that the condition includes a machinery and tool tax and what would be due under revenue share ordinance. Unless a utility facility is shown on the adopted comprehensive plan or other master plans for the county, the local planning commission and governing body shall review the facility to determine whether the location, character, and extent of the project is substantially in accord with the adopted comprehensive plan. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission find this proposed solar panel facility is substantially in accord with the adopted 2485 comprehensive plan and applicable parts thereof as required by section 15.2-2232 of the Code of Virginia. Overall, staff finds the proposal to be compatible with surrounding development and is consistent with the recommendations of the adopted 2045 comprehensive plan. Staff recommends the Planning Commission recommend approval of the proposed SUP to the Board of Supervisors, subject to the proposed conditions as amended. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is available to answer questions as well.
Before we get to questions from staff, are there any disclosures?
Mr. Chairman, I met earlier with the applicant at the library to just receive an overview of the project. That was several months ago.
And I joined you with that same meeting, and I also attended the community meeting at the Norge area. Anybody else for disclosures? Okay, questions for staff? There is a presentation from the applicant?
There'll be a presentation from the applicant.
Okay. All right, let me open the public comment period, please. And would you please state your name and address?
Good evening. My name is John Townsend. I'm with Sun Tribe Development, and I think we have a presentation loading up right now. Thank you. All right. Good evening. I want to thank members of the Planning Commission as well as the James City County Planning Department and all of you for being here this evening. Special thanks to Ms. Yates for her collaboration on the project and for presenting the staff report. I'm excited to share this unique project with the Commission, how we've worked with staff to address concerns, and how we've implemented lessons learned from previous projects. Next slide, please. Again, my name is John Townsend. I'm with Sun Tribe Development. I'm the lead developer on this project. Here's just a brief outline of what the presentation is going to show. This project will benefit the county by increasing jobs during construction, increased tax revenue and energy revenue share totaling more than $875,000 over the life of the project, and will protect the parcel from other more permanent development uses. The project is specifically designed to protect and improve the environment, complement the neighborhood, and be hidden from view. The ideal solar facility is the one that you don't even know is there. The energy generated by this facility will be consumed in the community right here where it's generated. And it will allow James City County citizens to take part in a solar facility even if they can't install solar on their own property because they rent or may not be able to afford it. And I'll expand on that program a little bit later. Ultimately, we are here seeking the Commission's recommendation for approval on the two items that Ms. Yates just declared, the special use permit and the 2232 approval. Next. Thank you. A quick little bit about our company. Sun Tribe was founded and is headquartered in Charlottesville. Many of my colleagues, myself included, were born and raised here in the Commonwealth. Sun Tribe has partnered nearby in Tidewater, Newport News, Virginia Beach on ground and roof-mounted school projects, and is actually building the Racefield Solar Facility for Dominion here in James City County. Sun Tribe Development also replied to an RFP here in the county in 2021 for a landfill project. Our team collectively has over 20 gigawatts of experience developing projects in Virginia and along the East Coast, and again has partnered with schools, municipalities, and local governments. To put that in perspective, that's thousands of projects of the size we're talking about here. Lastly, there's a little bit about the project team, and a lot of us are here with you today. Look forward to answering questions and talking about any concerns. A little bit about the project. We're proposing up to 5 megawatts with no additional construction stages or battery storage proposed. The orange line that you can see on the drawing there indicates the special use permit boundary of a little less than 70 acres. As Ms. Yates mentioned, I think around 67.8, I think is the number, out of a 130-acre parcel. Of that, less than 35 acres will be used for the actual panels, and the rest of the special use permit area is largely stormwater basins and open fields. The site is currently screened with existing mature vegetation on 3 sides, and we are proposing new vegetation along Richmond Road and a very small portion along the southern section there, but we understand the importance of shielding it from Richmond Road. The site is also surrounded by more than 40 acres of existing mature vegetation between the fence and the property boundary, and this will be preserved for the lifetime of the project. The facility will not generate any off-site noise during operation, and there'll be essentially no traffic during the 30 to 40-year life cycle of the project. It's important to note the project will also not draw on county services such as roads, water and sewer, schools, etc., and as mentioned, the facility is required to be decommissioned at the end of its life. Sun Tribe understands that protecting the rural character is a priority, and the project protects the viewshed of the roads and surrounding properties. The project will maintain significant setbacks and buffering, in many cases greater than what the county's A1 ordinance requires. Panels are set back from the property boundary more than 100 feet, and on average more than 200 or 300 feet. The closest residence is more than 600 feet away. Sun Tribe and the landowner, again, have agreed to preserve 44 acres of mature existing vegetation outside the fence line and inside the property boundary on the south, east, and west boundaries of the facility. Along Richmond Road, new vegetation is proposed according to the landscape plan provided by Timmons and in coordination with the planning department. The landscape plan is based on James City County ordinance and is a combination of deciduous and evergreen shrubs and trees. The intent is to establish vegetation between ground level and at least 8 feet high or so along Richmond Road to provide a consistent buffer from the road there. And we'll see at the end, I actually have some visual simulations that were created for the project. Solar projects can be a great complement to the community. This is a temporary use that will generate more than $875,000 for James City County without any draw on county services. Solar has additional benefits other than the direct revenue shown here. The biggest is a local source of zero emission energy production from a long-term reliable energy source, being the sun, and that helps to stabilize electricity prices. James City County is an energy importer, so another benefit is James City County being able to generate electricity right here in the community where it's being consumed, instead of being imported from other counties to meet the demand. Outside of the short, approximately 6-month construction timeline, the project will preserve the parcel in a large field of native grasses and pollinators for 30 to 40 years. The facility is a passive, quiet neighbor with constant remote monitoring, but very little on-site management required. Having personally grown up hiking and fishing in Virginia, improving environmental conditions is very important to me. Two of Sun Tribe's core values are nature and community, and these are just a couple of the reasons why Sun Tribe is so committed to environmental safeguards. To that end, we have proposed using Virginia native grasses in addition to pollinator-friendly species where practical, and also that's provided by the pollinator plan provided by Timmons, and that lines up with condition proposed number 18. We have significant setbacks from any field delineated stream and wetland features, and standard diligence includes threatened and endangered species database searches at a state and a federal level. James City County has robust stormwater requirements. We have worked with and will continue to work with SRP and the Colonial Soil and Water Conservation District to meet or exceed county and state requirements for erosion and sediment control, which is no different than other commercial construction types, and certainly during long-term operation. I wanted to show this slide right here, just a few examples of what sites with established ground cover look like throughout the state. It's important to note here, and I think you can see that rain is able to pass through in between the panels and certainly in between the rows. The trackers, which you can see, especially in the top left picture, those actually rotate east to west throughout the day, so there's not a consistent drip edge on the property. Also a reminder about these images, these are all taken from inside the facility fence line. All right, so this is on the inside as if you were taking a tour of the facility, not on an adjacent property or a road trying to look in. Again, there'll be some simulations at the very end. Thank you. Community conscious design. There's a lot on this slide and a lot that's detailed in the staff report, the packet, the project narrative, etc. Ultimately, we agree with the staff recommendation, and we believe that the facility does conform to the recommendations in the 2045 comprehensive plan. A couple of just highlights here. The staff report on page 9, and I quote, finds that the use is generally compatible with the character and area and generally in accordance with rural land development standards. Chapter 1 mentions projects like this being outside the PSA. Chapter 5, solar contributes to, and I quote, improve the high level of environmental quality in James City County. Chapter 10 encourages certain public or semi-public and institutional uses, improves quality of life for citizens, and is harmonious with other land uses. Harmonious with other land uses are being encouraged in the rural lands. James City County benefits jobs, revenue, and land protection for a long time. Chapter 10 talks about temporary use of land. That's what this project is going to be. The natural and cultural assets plan provided by the county, provided to the county a couple of years ago, has a great line that solar energy development is critical to reducing U.S. dependence on fossil fuels. It also talks a bit about stormwater, and after some multiple conversations with the SRP group, we feel very confident that this project can meet or exceed the requirements at the state and county level there. I also wanted to highlight a little bit about the shared solar program. James City County encourages accessory and residential solar in the county, and this project will directly benefit citizens who want to take part in that energy transition, but don't have the option to either put it on on their house. Maybe they're a renter or they can't afford the upfront cost. The program itself, which is a state mandated program, benefits community members most affected by higher energy prices. And energy that's generated at this voltage will stay in the community to be consumed. To assist with sort of the way the subscriber program works, which is where people can take part in a program like this to offset their energy use and receive a bill credit from Dominion, I reached out to neighborhood development here at the county, and we started some conversations with Susie Yates about how Sun Tribe and the county can partner so that citizens are aware that they have this opportunity here. And it's important to note that low-income residents in the county, which are identified by census numbers, my understanding, have the ability to generate the greatest savings here and actually have a strong reduction in their electricity prices on their bills. Last thing on this slide is just that we had the community meeting in May. Mr. Polster was present. I want to say about a dozen citizens showed up. There were some really great questions, but no vocal opposition to the project. As of Monday, we have not heard of any citizen opposition directly related to the project. And I spoke to Mr. Hipple this morning, who's the district supervisor, and he also was not aware of any citizen opposition to the project. Thank you. In recent years, solar development has been under intense scrutiny, much more than other similar development types. The list here, certainly not comprehensive, indicates the different agencies' reviews and studies that are required before construction of a solar facility can begin in James City County. I'm not going to go through the list one by one, but it certainly highlights the level of detail and requirements that must be met for erosion sediment control, stormwater management. We've worked with our civil engineering consultant, Tetra Tech, and again, SRP, and had a few exchanges with Mr. Wallace at the Colonial Soil and Water Conservation District to present a design that we are confident can meet those requirements. A couple highlights here. Construction timeline is estimated to take approximately 6 months. I would also point out that VDOT has been consulted here, and the site distance requirements are met for this project. The requirement is 490 feet, 95, excuse me. This section of Richmond Road has almost 2,000 feet of steady grade, straight shot to the entrance. So there is plenty of space and distance there for people to be able to see the potential construction up ahead. And to put that in context, that's actually the length of a small airport runway. So, unlike more intensive types of development, such as residential housing, modern solar facilities can be readily removed. Decommissioning bonding requirements certainly are included up front, but it's also, it makes sense that those would need to be updated throughout the life of the project for a project that's hopefully going to be around for 30 or 40 years. And so it's natural for those to be updated every 5 to 7 years. Thank you. Based on our analysis, the project provides many benefits to the county. Solar electricity generation is a safe technology. The sun shines on all of us. Panels are located on houses, schools, hospitals, government buildings, boats, RVs, etc. The project will generate approximately $875,000 for James City County without the accompanying draw on county services. The project aligns with James City County's long-term goals and comprehensive plan, protects the viewshed, is low impact to the community. It's an opportunity for the landowner to protect the land from other development uses for decades. In conclusion, in implementing lessons learned on other projects, the Planning Department has included a list of 34 provisions that Sun Tribe and the landowner have largely agreed to. We've been working with staff since October of 2022, and many adjustments, either voluntary or recommended, have been adopted by the project. That said, there is one condition that we think was well-intentioned, was introduced last week, that we believe inadvertently presents a fatal flaw that I'd like to discuss here in a few moments. But that is the end of the initial presentation, and I'm happy to either take questions now or continue with the condition that we'd like to discuss.
Are there any questions for the applicant, or do you want to hold off and listen to the change in the condition?
I think I'd rather hear the conditions,
Yep,
so
change.
if
I would
there's
too.
more
Okay.
conversation.
One more slide, please. Proposed condition number 11 requires the applicant to guarantee that new electrical distribution lines off-site, not party to the special use permit and outside of the parcel boundary, be buried underground. SunTribe understands, the sensitivity to some nearby Dominion upgrades that have taken place in the county. I've seen the new poles. I drove through this morning. What's being proposed here is substantially different than what has been installed there. County's well-intentioned goal of minimizing disturbance and maintaining the rural character may also not quite line up with underground installation. But I think the point I'd like to make here is that this is not a question of cost, willingness, or desire necessarily. SunTribe or any company that I know of doesn't have the authority to impose requirements on Dominion-owned infrastructure. Dominion, I know you all are aware, is a state corporation commission jurisdiction. We haven't seen this before on other projects in the state or on other projects in this county. I'm happy to sort of expand on some of the conversations that we've had with Dominion about the proposed upgrades to our system, but I'm also happy to pause here and let the commission ask questions, but we're not confident that this condition number 11 can be met by the project.
Questions on 11?
I'd like to get some staff feedback on the proposed change before delving into the pros and cons of that.
Sure. So as the commission members are aware, we to date have had 4 previous SUP applications for new solar farms. 1 was not approved, 3 were approved. Of those 3, 1 is under construction and 1 is already finished construction and is substantially in operation. I think, as you all were aware, I think the reference was made earlier to Richmond Road as part of the construction and operation and putting those facilities online. Some pretty substantial improvements were put into place by Dominion. I think in an effort to better mitigate those potential impacts that could be a result of this project, staff has proposed adding in this condition.
Can I get a legal opinion that the county has the right to ensue something that's on Dominion property and not the property that they're leasing? What's the verdict on that one?
I'll say it passed muster with the county attorney, so we believe it's.
We believe, and I want to make sure I understand this, is that if Dominion Power requires a change in the utility, it becomes their pecuniary liability?
Goal is to mitigate that potential impact, and it is an impact, a proposed condition designed to mitigate a potential impact. We do not yet have confirmation that any improvements, it may be that no improvements are required and that there won't be any new improvements done to the overhead utility infrastructure.
But this requires a surety to be posted right now. Do I read that correctly?
Prior to final site plan approval.
Right, and so what is the amount of the surety?
So again, so ultimately, the point of interconnect will be the existing switching station. If this condition is attached and this SUP is approved, staff will go out and obtain that estimate to do that work, and that will be the amount of the surety.
And what do we think that's going to be?
Couldn't tell you at this point.
So we're asking them to do something without knowing what it's going to cost? And we didn't discuss this?
That is staff's recommendation designed
Okay.
to mitigate that anticipated impact.
Now, I have another question on this. Is I believe recently the SSC, which is the Virginia state body that governs the interconnection, now has made a determination that the cost of that and the way that's being done is not the responsibility of the vendor. Is that correct? Because that has been a bone of contention in terms of the developer having to front those costs. And the committee just said no to that to Dominion. So I'm really trying to understand what this is about and what the cost is before we impose something like this on somebody.
That part I don't know. Staff would be happy to research that and get back to you.
I think it's part and parcel of the issue. Okay, are there any other questions for the applicant?
just since we're on this vein, is it into, so two questions. One, is the route to the Chickahominy Road substation down Richmond Road all the way and then down Chickahominy Road? Is that the intended path for?
That's my understanding. I look back just because I'm not sure about the road name, but the connection, the point of interconnection that's proposed is right within the site boundary, and we've voluntarily, it's already offered to ground mount all of the equipment right there. So that's an area that we have input and some say in, and we've already taken that step. From there, the project has some proposed upgrades for less than 3/4 of a mile to the intersection at Anderson's Corner. That is all that Dominion has indicated at this point.
And then,
Please state your name.
Sorry.
Jeff Suttle, also with Sun Tribe.
Right.
I just wanted to sort of clarify the substation where our facilities, with the upgrades where the power would go. That's Tawano substation, which is at Anderson Corner.
and then when does it become not your electricity anymore? So, I mean, you generate and then send it off to the grid. Is it at the transmission point or once it gets to the substation?
The point of interconnection is where the
Okay.
demarcation line stops. The utility owns all the equipment, even if we're made to pay for it, they own all of the equipment up to that point, which for this project is within the property and the SUP boundary limit. And then from there, it goes ground mounted to the site itself. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Mr. Holman?
Can Dominion be required to bury power lines if they make a major change in existing power lines? Existing infrastructure, the support system?
I think in the course of normal business, no. The difference here and the distinction here is that staff is recommending this as a condition to a special use permit.
But let's assume we, and the Board of Supervisors approves this without condition number 11. And Dominion feels the need to put some ugly superstructure up. Can we have no oversight,
Not without a special use permit condition, no.
and they don't need a special use permit to
They can just go and do it.
redesign. They just go and do it.
They can just go and do it, which pretty much like they did on Richmond Road.
Well, I'd like to make a request for staff, if we close this out, that in fact, we make a determination of what that surety amount is going to be, and that it's defined in terms of, on a map, so that the board can see that they're responsible up to that one point that's on their property, and then we draw a line all the way to the Tohana substation and indicate that that's what they would have to provide, that's what the cost of the surety would be, so that at least they understand what this condition is doing, because right now, I don't understand it, or what the impacts are.
That was going to be my question. I was going to ask the applicant, at the risk of being repetitive, to once again go through, are you advocating removing all of condition 11? Are you fine with underground utilities on your property as if need be, but not outside of the property to the substation? How exactly, again, would you like to change or? Quantify that condition 11.
Thank you for the opportunity to clarify. So on our site, which is part of the SUP boundary that we are party to and required to meet the conditions, we are already taking the steps to eliminate any new poles and ground mount the equipment from Dominion to where it connects to our equipment. And all of our cabling within the site will either be underground or mounted below the panels. So we're not proposing new poles. This is an area where we do have input. To a point that was made earlier, it's not necessarily a question, in my opinion, of the amount of the surety, because I don't have any way to guarantee that Dominion will follow that. Even if they agreed to it once, they could change it the next year, and then we would, in theory, be delinquent without any opportunity to.
Recourse.
Yes, sir. So again, it's in my opinion, it's not something that we can try and solve with money, because I don't have any way to guarantee that this can be met.
So in the note that we're asking to go to the board, besides defining the area that this SUP is, or this condition is asking for, and to determine the cost from their connect to the Joanna Court, there also is a determination on the part of the county that even though that's a Dominion problem, we're going to make this a Sun Tribe problem, which is what this condition does. Do I understand that?
Yes.
I would like to make sure that that's very clear in the report that goes to them along with this for it, if we can. All right, so any other questions on this item, or are there other questions we have? Please, Mr. Rose.
It's a separate, it's on a different
Yes,
topic.
please.
I was curious, you mentioned the 875,000 direct revenue benefit to the county. Can you dig into that a little bit and provide some details on how that's calculated, or where those numbers come from?
Sure. It's an estimate based on how we've guessed that the property will increase in value based on the property that is installed. So it's part of it is real property tax increases, which makes up about half of that. The second half of that is the revenue share option, which is part of condition number 2, which I think came out to $424,000, and the combination of those two numbers comes to $879, give or take $1,000. Yes, sir.
Solomon.
But, and this is a guess, by putting a condition in place where Dominion could put up new poles, more intrusive poles, and have somebody else pay for them, which is what this does, right?
Right.
Could we be encouraging Dominion to do just that, to do just what we don't want them to do? I mean, if they were on the fence, not quite sure whether they wanted to put new poles or not, and all of a sudden, because it would be expensive to them, but now they have somebody else to pay for it, that makes the decision a lot easier, doesn't it?
Respectfully, I can't speak for Dominion, but it seems like Dominion tends to make a decision on how to make current and future upgrades based on what is going to be in their best interest.
Yeah, I would too.
I think the other thing that bothers me about it, if you look at that last sentence, is in the course of this thing, let's say that it gets hooked up to Tohanna, right? What that last sentence says, if Dominion does another change to that, they're liable to go send it to the other substation. I'm just puzzled. Oh, but anyhow, that's the way I read that for it. Any other questions on this issue? Or I have a couple, unless there's somebody else. Go ahead.
Traffic management plan, you talked about the 2,000 feet. So a couple of questions. One, does VDOT require any surety or bonding for damage to the road? I've gotten complaints from one of the other facilities of damage to, it's not one of yours, but it's damage that's incurred to the road just by the amount of traffic coming in. And then secondly, will you require traffic to come eastbound on Richmond Road to turn in, or will they come through like Barhamsville and then try to make a U-turn at one of the cut-throughs and come back? Just more concerned about, the amount of traffic that frequents Route 60 now with upcoming 64 construction and backups and the like. It gets a little tenuous at times.
Great question. I'm actually, for the first question about the bonding requirement, I don't know that we're required to post a bond to guarantee the road conditions. No one on my team is nodding, but I know in other scenarios we have done the pre-construction road evaluations and made commitments that if the road was damaged because of the project, that it could be repaired. So I think that that's reasonable. The second question, the facility would need to be approached from the east. I would agree that U-turns are not ideal at any of the, not cut-throughs, but
It's the median, the
the
center
median cuts, yes, sir,
yeah.
thank you. But we've engaged with Dewberry to help us evaluate the best way to get, during construction, the tractor trailer traffic through there. I would think that Route 60 is well built to manage that traffic, for only a few months. But again, that's something I would defer to our consultants.
Other questions? I've got a couple here. If we could go to slide 9. I want to try to understand that shared solar program piece for it. And if I understand it correctly, that was established by the legislature for 22-23. And so if we're going to take advantage of this, it's really important that this gets through the board. Otherwise, it escapes us unless there's a continuance, which we don't know about. Am I correct about that?
That is largely correct. Yeah, the project has been around, and it has, you're able now to submit projects to be selected for the program, yes.
And if I read the material correctly, it almost sounds like a low-income family could end up with a utility bill of $55.
That's possible. I will correct you with my understanding is that the lower income subscriber would actually have a reduction, a percentage-based reduction in their utility rate per kilowatt hour, and the $55.10 minimum bill would be erased entirely.
And in one of your other slides, you allude to the fact that the amount of power that's going to be generated from this project will power 1,000 homes. Is that an estimate or pretty close to what it's going to be?
It's pretty close. It is still an estimate. Obviously, each home is different based on how many people live there and how they use the power, but that number is based off of a Dominion presentation at a conference the year before last for Virginia residential
So
uses.
if I do the math correctly, potentially there's 1,000 low-income families in this county that can benefit from this program.
That is one way to look at it, absolutely.
The other thing is that kind of bothers me about a program like this, and we saw it in the Richmond Road one by the Norge School, is how people get to find out about this. I mean, we have a sewer pump out system where we actually, from the county staff, goes out and solicit. Have you approached the staff to try to see if there's a way that we can facilitate it so that we can reach the right families in the county?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I actually did reach out to Marion Payne at Neighborhood Development. At the current moment, there's not a program that makes this opportunity available to low-income residents in the county. But again, SunTribe is happy to work in any sort of partnership that the county would be interested in to help make this, in some ways it's the sort of thing that anyone could sign up for and it sort of instantly realize savings.
I want to switch subjects here and go to the decommissioning slide that you talked about. If I recall correctly, and I may be wrong about this, is that in your not your presentation, but your application, you talk about taking some extraordinary steps to secure any damaged solar panels during the lifetime so that they're stored and there isn't any kind of a contamination. Did I misread that? Is that part of the condition?
I don't believe that's part of a condition necessarily. I can speak a little bit about damaged panels, though, if that's helpful. So for a couple reasons, probably the simplest is that a damaged panel is not generating electricity, which is what the facility is designed to do. So if a panel were to get damaged for any reason, it would be removed and replaced pretty much right away. There's no expectation that those would be stored on site. I don't know that that's a habit that people are getting into, but so any damaged panel could be removed, replaced, and disposed of if it couldn't be repaired.
The last question I have is I know that your company was the first in Virginia to get the gold certification from the DEQ in terms of the pollinators and the maintenance. And within that program, there's a prescription in terms of what the maintenance schedule is like. And do you intend to, in fact, look for that same certification in this project?
So we have proposed a pollinator plan that is directly based off of the Virginia Pollinator Smart program. We have not committed to the gold certification. There are a couple requirements there that wouldn't necessarily apply to the project, and we do feel like we've met the intent of condition number 18.
Can you talk about the maintenance schedule and what you intend to do, which is also part of that program?
I actually have the scorecard in front of me, so I'm going to look at it to make sure I don't misspeak here. So if you're asking about number 7, we're talking about vegetation management plan,
Right.
Annual monitoring. invasive species mapping, excuse me. Those hadn't been considered as part of the plan. But if that's important to the board, I think that that's something that could be considered.
There's the mowing schedule in there, and then the maintenance after 3 years to make sure that the vegetation buffer remains in there. And then, of course, not to use any herbicides for it.
We are not proposing herbicides for sure. I would bet that the mowing schedule is once a quarter.
If those conditions aren't there, or you're unwilling to, please get with the staff, because I think that's an important piece to make sure that through the lifetime of this project, 30 or 40 years, in fact, we're assured that the property is cared for.
Yes, I believe that is in our narrative, that there is maintenance included. I'm sorry, I've sort of misunderstood that. Understanding that the vegetation within the facility and the vegetative buffer along the road will be required to be maintained by the project for the entire operational life of the facility. Obviously, when construction is ongoing, there'll be county and state level requirements, to make sure that the site gets to a full stabilization level. That's when the permit is released, but we're still required to make sure that the stabilization and the ground cover is established for the life of the project.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I have one more if I could.
Sure.
Sorry I missed this earlier, but you mentioned in your presentation that you don't anticipate having battery storage there.
Correct.
Is that something in the future you would anticipate being a part of this project?
No, we include that because we've gotten that question before. A lot of companies have proposed solar and storage as a combination package, and that's just not part of this project.
Thank you.
If I have one more second, I actually did have a few slides at the end. So I mentioned, that's great if you could start right there. So I mentioned some simulations. Our colleagues and consultants at Timmons put this together. This is approximately what the westbound view of the facility would look like. You can see the panels in the background. If we go to the next slide, the proposed growth at 5 years, you can see there's no way to see the panels. And then at 10 years, we're seeing substantial growth. And again, you cannot see the facility. And we'll go one more. Now we've got the eastbound direction here, 5-year growth and 10-year growth. Just wanted to share that with the board and the commission.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, I've got one speaker's card, Miss Patricia H. Hunter.
Hi, thank you for your time. My name is Patricia Hunter. I'm one of the primary Martin family landowners that engaged with the county staff in October of last year and submitted the special use permit to James City County in March of this year for the Richmond Road solar project. A little background on me. My mother was raised in the area in a house on Forge Road in Toanna, and I still have a strong attachment to the area. Another branch of my family is the Coles family, which still holds several parcels along Forge Road that we have had since the 1600s. The Martin branch of my family has been actively working with SunTribe Solar for the past 3 years. This is what we are here to address this evening. We engaged with SunTribe because they are a Virginia-based company, as they mentioned, and their values aligned with our goals and vision for the land. We want to be good neighbors and good stewards of the property. My family would like to maintain ownership of the property and preserve it for future generations. I have 2 daughters and would like them to be able to carry our legacy forward. My family has seen increased interest in our properties. I've received letter upon letter in the past several years, many from developers, small landowners, and various other entities that find James City County attractive and ripe for growth. When approached by the solar companies, and there were many, we dismissed them out of hand at first. However, we began to look forward and ponder what the future would hold. Preservation of ownership was foremost in our minds. Education is key to all good decisions, and through education, we began to see the absolute positives that solar would bring to our situation. Solar is a complementary and temporary land use. It is compatible with silviculture and other agricultural uses. It would not negatively impact the community or neighborhoods and would be far less invasive than a housing development or other by right uses on this parcel. The solar project checked all the boxes. I respectfully ask that we be allowed to explore land use approval, as many other landowners have done for decades. Thank you for your time and consideration. The Martin family and Sun Tribe Solar wish to move forward in a positive, respectful manner on this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do y'all have any questions for me? Okay.
I have one more speaker card, Mr. Richard Matchell.
I'm Richard Matula, 113 Mid-Ocean. I have a number of questions. Should I go through the questions, or you want to answer it one by one?
Sir, this is a chance for you to speak to us. This is not a discussion and question and answer.
Okay.
Some of your questions can be answered by the staff at the conclusion, and I'm sure they'll be willing to get with you to try to answer them.
Okay. Well, the first question is, I may be missing this, and if I did, I apologize. What is the exact life of the project? I've heard something between 30 and 40 years. Is there going to be somebody on site to monitor this facility? Having worked in a power station as a teenager, there's inspections in any generating facility. There are inspections. We inspected the transformers regularly. How will you know if a unit is defective? Is this going to be automatic or what? What is going to be the mowing schedule? I heard you mentioned about taking care of the land. One solar farm has goats. Are there going to be goats here, or is it going to be mowed, and what is the schedule? Typically in the summer, at least the mowing has to take place twice, maybe more. This unit is basically almost like a parking lot. What about drainage? Is there going to be any catch basins to catch the water so that it could possibly go into the aquifer? If a unit is defective, as questioned before, how is it going to be determined? Where is it going to be stored? And how quickly is it going to be replaced? Where is it going to be stored? Is it going to be stored on the property or somewhere else? And at the end, you mentioned decommissioning. I'd like to have more details about this. Solar panels use exotic materials. You have glasses, the photovoltaic cells, and the structure itself. A lot of this is exotic. Where is it going to be recycled? Is it going to be recycled here in James City County? Is it going to be dumped? Where? Are there any credits or rebates involved in this project? Federal, state, or local? If technology improves, this is decades long, if technology improves, will the units be replaced? What provision is there? With photovoltaics, sometimes there are dramatic improvements. If there's dramatic improvements, is there any provisions to replace the units to get more efficiency? Is this in the contract? Photovoltaics, a solar farm, generate direct current. The grid is electric current. I don't quite understand the rationale here. At some point, the DC current has to be converted to AC. Is this unit going to be directly connected to the grid? Or is it going to be stored in batteries and then at some point connected to the grid? When generation is direct current, in order to go to AC, you have to have an inverter. where is the inverter going to be placed physically on the map? And then from the inverter, you have to have a cable going to the grid. Where is that cable on the map, and where is the connection to the grid? I'd like to see these on the map itself. So I think those are the questions and comments that I have. Thank you.
If you'd get with Ms. Yates, who's over here, she may be able to help you with some of those answers, as well as maybe the applicant will. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have any other speaker cards? Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Please come up.
My name is William Lee. I live at 4560 Long Hill Road, Williamsburg. That's War Hill Inn, bed and breakfast. We have 32 acres of land, and I thought I could offer a perspective from the landowner's standpoint. So here I go. All right, energy, safe, clean, and abundant sounds good. Okay, I came to Williamsburg in 1960 as a 5-year-old. In 1967, my current home had no electricity on that road. There was 2 miles of no wires, no electric wires on Long Hill Road. Long Hill Road is a lot different now, right? We all know that. That's thanks to you guys having, it's a compliment to your good stewardship. Okay, in 1986, my family wanted to keep our land. We wanted to put a business in our home, the inn that you know now. A few of our neighbors had doubts. We came in here. As you can tell, I'm nervous. We were nervous. And, but now my neighbors are very complimentary. Some have even stayed as guests at my inn. So times change. So property owners need some options for revenue from the property. If you're going to have to keep your property, you got to be able to get money from it. To me, the Richmond Road solar project seems a good development use for the land. Over time, I believe the community will appreciate the land use. Everyone can benefit from clean, safe, abundant energy, and this project is offering discounted energy from a local source. And we need revenue for taxes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
For all of your work, for your time.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this item? Hearing and seeing none, I will close the public comment and open the item up for discussion.
I'll just kick it off. You know, the comprehensive plan, two important elements in the comp plan is one, search for alternate energy sources for the county, and the other is preservation of rural lands. And in my opinion, this project does both, and more so in light of some of the recent changes we've made to the rural land development ordinances, where the by right acreage is now 1 house per 20 acres. And so with what appears to be a lack of people willing to farm for an income and the 1 to 20, I think one of the things that appeals to me about this project is it's an opportunity for landowners to earn money on their property, to continue to earn money on their property. And I think that's a very important component. I was very impressed with the applicant and the willingness of the applicant to be a good corporate citizen for James City County. I'm very supportive, very impressed with a number of the conditions, everything from pollinators and native plants to their decision not to use herbicides, and they seem to be very environmentally responsible. And so looking at those positives and the fact that it does provide an opportunity for landowners to earn some money, I'll be supportive of this project.
Thank you very much. For anybody else? Barbara?
Yes, I too agree with almost everything that Mr. Townsend has said. The tax positive revenue for JCC, no new schools, no services needed, and a good source of revenue. My question is, can we approve this SUP with the condition number 11 that's in question?
So at whatever point the commission makes a motion, if you could just make that clear in the motion, what you want your recommendation to be going to the Board of Supervisors, staff will be happy to convey that. So, I mean, you can or cannot, because ultimately the board will do the final decide. The point now, since it's a recommendation, you just need to provide that direction back to staff, and we'll include that in the board staff report. Either include it, not include it, modify it.
I have the same concern.
Yeah.
I share the same concern, but I guess on the flip side, if we go ahead and approve it without condition 11, I don't understand what that means.
What does that do?
If we pull that out versus keeping it in, or Frank, as you suggested, getting some clarity on what that means.
I think there's two things. Is one, we need the clarity. But I think the other piece is that when we say we approve this thing, it's with the proviso that, in fact, the board will take a look at this portion and understand our concerns. But ultimately, I believe it's their issue to decide one way or another. It's up to us to make the recommendation based on what we know.
And I would like to make a recommendation that we accept a special use permit 230012.
Can we see if there's any other
I'm sorry,
discussions
I
or
thought you were
comments
ready.
from any of the
Go right
other
ahead.
commissioners? Mr. Haldeman?
No, I too intend to support this. I can't improve on Mr. Kropp's comments, so I'll just keep my mouth shut.
Mr. O'Connor?
I am in favor of the solar farm, and for much the same reasons that Mr. Kropp put in there. But I guess I would like to understand where Ms. Null wants to go with this number 11, because obviously I think we were all surprised, or at least those of us who live on our end of the county, to see all the improvements that go on. And you can see all the Dominion work that's going on from Richmond and points east of Williamsburg to the transmission lines. And certainly what we saw on Richmond Road, I think, was quite a surprise to everybody. And understanding it's not Sun Tribe's transmission lines, and so I guess I'd like to understand where Ms. Null wants to go with that SUP 11, and sort of, I guess I'd just like discussion to understand where everybody is on SUP number 11.
I think we're approving everything except for 11 based on more information, of which that more information is to understand what the surety and the cost is from their connection to the Tohanna substation. And also to understand the idea that we're making it Sun Tribe's responsibility when it's outside of their thing. But that's an explanation that the board needs to come to. So I'm looking for clarification on what it means. I don't think that we want to approve 11 right now because there's still more information to happen. Go ahead, Rich.
Can I just ask, could we say that we're recommending condition 11 for that, for only the land inside the project boundary? And in other words, not get into Dominion and who's paying for the extra line, and if Dominion pays for a pole. If we just say we like the what's pointed out in condition 11, where if there's an upgrade, say, to the overhead lines, or there's some damage inside the project site, then the applicant will bury the lines per the terms of that condition, and just leave it as only applying to the project property boundary, whatever you want to, however you want to define it, and then let anything that goes on outside there, because I think condition 11 has some merit to it. Right. For upgrades or repairs internal to the property.
Right, I agree.
And so if the applicant would be willing, and the board and the commission obviously be willing to accept that caveat, that it's only for the overhead transmission lines inside the property boundaries, I'd be happy putting that stipulation on there and moving it forward.
Are we in agreement with that?
Oh, but there's no, I understand the intention and I appreciate the intention. So I guess my question is, if it goes for, and this is for the applicant, right? So if the expectation is that from our level or the board's level that SUP number 11, that condition would move forward, and based on discussion, I'm not speaking for the board, but based on discussions that they had before, you know, I anticipate that they would be favorable to having those lines buried. You know, I guess the question becomes for the applicant is, you know, does that change your project? Does it change your returns? Because I imagine it's a pretty hefty investment to bury those lines.
Well, he stated that as a killer. So, I mean,
So-
I think Rich's comment, and I saw 5 nods to that, is to just ask for the recommendation to change 11 so that it only includes in the property boundary, period, and not outside, period. And if the board decides to change that for whatever reason, that's on them. And I mean, and they do have the notes that says, hey, we did ask what the cost was from here to here, and they needed time to do that. So I'm sure that they'll put that as part of their staff report when they go forward. So at least when it gets to the board, they'll have a complete set of information to decide whether they want to put it in or not.
I think it would be important for staff to do the
Right.
math and say, this is what it would cost, or, you know.
Right.
Yeah,
And let the county attorney then be able to stand up there and say, you know, we can go to court.
right.
Okay, so I think that's another way to do that. Are there any other comments or discussions, Tim? Are you still,
No, I just,
okay, I just want to make sure that we're, you know, got everything out here. Are there any other discussions or comments about this application? I'm sorry, go ahead. Mr. Townsend, please come up. Yeah, please do. We could use the help.
I genuinely appreciate the conversation and the discussion about making an amendment. I would just like to highlight that even within the property boundary along Richmond Road, Dominion does own an easement there, and they do own infrastructure. So part of that system, even within the property boundary that's part of the SUP, is still owned and will always be owned by the utility company. From that point of the interconnection where we take ownership, that's where we have locus of control over input and how we can really ask and apply money to solve and keep things underground. Beyond that, it unfortunately still, we could pay again, and then they could, in a year or two, send it right back above, and in theory, we would be in violation after making a substantial economic investment in the community. So
would it be appropriate to say to the DMARC?
I'd like to, yeah, let me just clarify. So again, Jeff Suttle, Sun Tribe Development, John's colleague. It's, the cost, I think, is we don't see, I mean, it's relevant, but what the condition, I mean, the crux of the issue for us is the condition effectively creates a catch-22 for us. We, Sun Tribe, have no ability to obligate Dominion to do anything with their system. We get to provide input on the small stretch of equipment that connects the solar plant to their distribution line that is on the property. We get input over that, but not final say. We have already agreed to put that piece underground and ground mount the equipment for that small stretch that connects between the solar plant and the existing distribution line that crosses along that frontage. Once you get past that, it's part of their network. It serves sort of other residences, businesses along that line. Like they will not entertain our input, and you know, we have no ability to
Let me
force them.
understand what you've just said, is you've already agreed to a condition that they are responsible to the distribution box. Is that in writing? Is that a condition?
It's in our site plan. That is
Part of the master plan, the
Okay,
point of
but,
interconnection.
but a way to help clarify this and what they're responsible for is to, in fact, put an 11 in there. We could.
To the point, to underground, to the point of interconnection. on
Exactly.
site.
Period. And if the board wants to go back and change that with the information associated with it. So are you agreeable to add a new condition, whatever it is, that says you're responsible for the connection to the distribution box and only that?
To the point of interconnection.
Point of interconnection.
The demarcation line or the change of
Right.
ownership. Yes, sir.
Okay, so if we get that phrasing in for that, are we agreeable? Is that okay on the staff side?
We can forward that on to the board, yes.
Right, but we're talking about, yes, a recommendation to add that condition.
When we get to that point, I can help restate that, just so we've got clarity on the motion and.
Now, before we get to the
solidify that.
motion, and thank you very much, unless there's anything else.
Thank you very much.
Just point out, we'll add that condition, but remove condition 11. Or change condition 11 to
amend
that.
condition 11.
Okay, not just add that condition. as
Right.
another condition.
You'll amend condition 11, yep.
Is that clear?
It is to me, yes.
Okay, well, you're the one that has the right to decide. Okay,
I think we've
all right.
got it.
So we're going to, besides, I'm going to support it for all the reasons you've talked about on that. We're going to need two motions on this. The first motion that I need is consistency with the comprehensive plan. And then the second motion that I need is for the SUP with the recommendation that we're making. So can I get a motion on the consistency, please?
And that would be to recommend approval of the resolution that's included in your agenda packets as presented.
Mr. Rogers?
I hope I heard that. I'd like to make a motion that we approve special use permit 23-0012.
Sorry, Steve, we're doing the comprehensive. First motion is consistency
That
with
it's
it.
consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Right.
And that you're
That's what I
recommending-
was working towards.
And that the motion would be to recommend approval of that resolution contained in your agenda packets.
Yes.
I have a motion on the floor, Mr. Holt.
We do. Mr. Croft?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Mr. Rose?
Aye.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
And Mr. Polster?
Aye.
Motion
The
carries.
next motion that I need is for the approval of the SUP with the removal of 11 with the addition of point of connection.
To amend condition.
Amend the condition to a point of connection. Do I have a motion?
And if I could just, let me restate that a little bit for clarity of the minutes as
Right.
directed to me, just to make sure I've got a good understanding. The motion will be to recommend approval of the special use permit to the Board of Supervisors with the conditions as presented. I'm actually going to make two clarifications. With a recommended edit to condition 11, that utilities be undergrounded up to the point of interconnection. And I'm hoping your motion would also include, earlier in the staff presentation, Ms. Yates made a clarification to condition number 2, which is the Code of Virginia payment to localities for public improvements. I think she made a clarification of that as part of her staff report. I want to make sure that if the commission is agreeable, that that's included in your motion as well.
I have a motion to that effect.
The rest of 11 is stricken?
And that the commission's recommendation would be that the rest of 11 be stricken.
I have a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion on the floor.
Mr. Croft?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Mr. Rose?
Aye.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
And Mr. Polster?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Moving right along to the next item on our agenda is Z 22-004 and SUP 22-0026, 829 Richmond Road, Hankins-Dunn rezoning and residential cluster development. Ms. Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. The applicant has requested a deferral of this case until your November 1st, 2023 meeting. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is also available.
Questions for staff? Okay, I will open up the public hearing, and I have a number of speaker cards. And the first one is Mr. Eric Joss. Okay. All right, Mr. Robert Mandrell. The November meeting. Okay, thank you. Don Estrin. Okay, thank you very much. And Michael Hozan. Okay, please.
Good evening. Again, my name is Michael Hosang, and I live at 8404 Camellia Court. And from discussing issues with various neighboring residents and review of the staff report that was put out for this meeting, I ask that you do not approve this request. From the resident perspective, again, I live in Wellington, and this proposed property is going to butt right up against our development. And there's several issues that we are looking at with this. One's going to be increased traffic. One, you're going to get increased noise. There's going to be a drain on the water and the power. Whitehall residents who are going to be right next to this development also are going to face issues with this proposed development using their property for transportation purposes. And some of the questions I have are 582 residences really necessary at this time? If you drive through different areas of this district and of the county, there are a lot of for sale signs for homes. And so I'm thinking that this development is not necessary at this point. I want to add, for full disclosure, that I'm running for school board for the Stonehouse District. And based on that, this development is or would be part of the Stonehouse District. Currently, the Stonehouse Elementary School is above capacity. Taking on almost 600 residents, more residents for this area is going to devastate Stonehouse Elementary School, and it will definitely overwhelm Twano Middle School and War Hill High School. Now, there have been recent studies that have been looking at the feasibility of having a new elementary school for James City County. Those studies have come back that it's too expensive for James City County at this point to have a new elementary school. Those studies have come back and said it is financially feasible that they could potentially build on to current elementary schools, build a little wing, and not build an entire new elementary school, and then have to have staffing for that elementary school, et cetera. So cost-wise for our county, it's more economical not to have a new elementary school and just maybe build onto other schools. This 600 resident development would devastate Stonehouse District and James City County. We would have to build a new elementary school if this development came in. And doing that, the only way that the county would be able to finance that is raising our taxes. And I haven't talked to anyone yet that wants to raise our taxes. Now, currently the school system does not have enough bus drivers to service the developments, and that service has been curtailed. Now, based on the driver shortage, Whitehall families are now forced to either drive or walk their students to Stonehouse Elementary School. That's about, if you look at how the crow flies, it's maybe a quarter mile to half a mile, but to walk it, it's over a mile to get there. If you're driving your students to the school, families have been waiting for over an hour to either pick up or drop off their students. And without any drastic changes from the school system or the Board of Supervisors on how this county is now using or operating the buses and drop off children, this proposed development is not supportable. Now, the staff report states that there will be an increase of approximately 186 students for all three schools. And I'm trying to figure out why or how that is, because Whitehall itself has approximately 140 students just in the elementary school. So if you're increasing or putting in 600 residences in that area, that's going to be more than 186 total students for our school system. Now I need to add one other issue that residents have talked to me about from Whitehall. And they said that the developer has given them a letter initially stating that they wanted the HOA for Whitehall to sign it, saying that they approve of this, and then they were going to receive various incentives if they signed the letter. The Whitehall HOA did not sign the letter, and what happened then is they received a second letter stating that the developer was withdrawing those incentives, basically bullying Whitehall HOA to try to sign that letter and try and get approval for this development. This act of bullying, again, is not the way to get residents or others to join in an endeavor. And I hope that you take this into consideration when you make your decision regarding this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this item? Does the applicant wish to make any comment? Okay, we do have a motion to defer this item till our 1 November Planning Commission meeting. Can I get a motion to that effect, please?
So moved.
For clarification, Mr. Chairman, that would be to leave the public hearing open.
Open, I'm sorry,
your
yes,
November 1st
exactly.
meeting. Okay. Great, we have a motion on the floor to postpone this item until your November 1st meeting and to leave the public hearing open. Mr. Kropf.
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor.
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman.
Aye.
Mr. Rose.
Aye.
Ms. Knoll.
Aye.
Mr. Rogers.
Aye.
And Mr. Polster.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Okay, so we are moving on to planning commissions and considerations. Anything? All right, planning director's report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Nothing additional over than what's been presented in my report in the PC agenda packet, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions for Mr. Holt? Okay, planning commission discussion and requests. Anything that we want to bring up with Mr. Holt to keep this meeting going?
You know, just one, and it's really one of mechanics only because we all, you know, we had two applicants tonight who I think were surprised by conditions. And I may be misspeaking, but you know, I just understanding from a brief conversation with Mr. Getty yesterday that they weren't quite aware of proffers. So I guess I'm just curious what our system is now for proffers.
I think it's a good point because I raised the discussion point with Mr. Holt and he gave me a very good explanation. So let me turn it over to him.
So, you know, we do, in terms of the application review, when it comes into staff, we, as best as we are able to determine as the plan review progresses and as items are known, as staff, we certainly do our best to make those issues known to the applicants. One of the, I'll use the terms very generally, staff's hands are a little bit tied for rezonings specifically and for proffers. The new 2018 General Assembly legislation does not allow staff to have those discussions with the applicant. And so specific to proffers, our hands are tied quite a bit. But, you know, in terms of identifying inconsistencies with the comprehensive plan, identifying items, generally from land use point of view, that staff is recommending that be mitigated in one form or fashion, especially with respect to special use permits. I think staff does a pretty good job communicating those to applicants along the way. Certainly as applications get ready to go into the PC packet, there are always sort of last minute tweaks and adjustments. But again, we do our best to communicate those as best as we are able with the applicants prior to.
I think one of the things that surprised me in the discussion that we had this morning, I guess, was that the county has started a new fiscal impact statement worksheet. And so they fill that in. Well, it gets to this point about going back and forth because that was a proffer condition that they put in there. So there was no way to communicate whatever the disconnect was that we saw in the packet versus what they heard. And so I think it's a rather new process in those terms that led to some of this And that's best that I can at least come to why we ended up with that same disconnect that you brought up. Mr. Getty brought it up to me too.
So just to clarify on Tim's question, so in other words, if there's a proffer and staff feels that this is not enforceable or doable or not acceptable, staff cannot communicate that back to the applicant?
It's been the county's position under the 2018 legislation that staff is unable to negotiate proffers.
But I mean, even if the applicant doesn't know that staff disagrees with that particular proffer, doesn't it seem like that's making the process more cumbersome and is going to foster more deferral requests and drag these projects out?
Staff always does our best to provide excellent customer service within the constraints of what the General Assembly puts in place.
Very good, thank you.
How about that for an on-the-spot answer?
I guess my question is it, you know, and this is bucket, but I mean, is it negotiating by just saying these proffers are not acceptable?
You're not able to do that outside of a staff report.
So the applicant won't know until the staff report becomes a matter of open to the public.
Correct, and based on staff's analysis, our finding of if those impacts are mitigated and the degree to which what is being offered are proffered is consistent or not with the comprehensive plan and adopted policies by the board.
Well, thank you, Tim. Oh, Mr. Rose.
I have a separate question unless Tim has more.
I mean, I know some localities offer the ability for the applicant to sign an affidavit that the proffers are completely voluntary and blah, 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 blah. And I know our county attorney doesn't subscribe to that. I just feel like, one, it's a disservice to the applicant, and it's also a disservice to the citizens who plan to come out, and then the staff, for them, they have to advertise it and then make sure that we're all held accountable properly, and, we have the opportunity to not grant the deferral, which I think is a disservice to everybody in the process too. So I just wish we could come up with a better mousetrap on that one, so.
Mr. Rose.
My question is related. What happens in this scenario? Is there a scenario where we don't grant the deferral?
Once the item is placed on the PC's agenda, it is within the Planning Commission's purview to dispose of that, whether it be to postpone, recommend approval, or recommend denial. You all are not obligated to act in any specific way. The question is before you. Yep.
Any other questions or discussions on this? Mr. Holman.
Just an observation. We had two public hearings on the agenda today. One was on rural lands, but agricultural land. One was LDR, but agricultural land. And one on LDR, agricultural, is under pressure to build a lot of houses. Whether that gets approved or not is a matter to be seen. But and then, of course, the other one became a solar farm, or is on its way to becoming a solar farm. This part of the county is going to continue to see this. There's plenty more real estate in both categories, rural lands and within the PSA, but agricultural. And the people of James City County have pleaded with us over at least the last 4 comprehensive plan revisions to protect agricultural land, both inside and outside the PSA. Becoming increasingly hard to respect their opinions. So that's all.
Any other comments, discussions?
Oh, please.
Okay, next item is, Mr. Kraft, you are the September?
I am, and I have the extra bonus of also handling the July meeting as well, because the Board of Supervisors didn't meet in August. So I get to summarize July and August cases. So
Lucky
that's
you.
exciting. All right.
Nobody better.
Unless there's anything else, to have a motion to adjourn to our 4 October meeting.
Do.
Mr. The voice vote?
Voice vote's fine.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.